The contract lay on the lacquered desk between them like a loaded pistol, and Marisol Vance refused to be the first to look away from it. "Sign it," the Duke of Witherholm said. His voice was the same voice that had been giving orders in this room for 7 years, ever since his father's death had made him master of an estate that swallowed 3 counties whole. It was a voice that did not bend, did not soften, and did not entertain the notion of refusal. It had buried 2 younger brothers, 3 lawsuits, and 1 disastrous betrothal, and emerged from each grave colder than it had gone in. Marisol kept her hands folded in her lap. The lace at her cuffs was 3 years out of fashion, and she was painfully aware that Von Ashcombe, 6th Duke of Witherholm, had noticed. He noticed everything. It was, she had been warned by her aunt, the worst thing about him. "I would prefer to read it again," she said. "You have read it twice. And I shall read it a 3rd time, Your Grace. Since you have proposed, I sign away the next several years of my life upon its terms." Something flickered behind his pale gray eyes. It might have been irritation. It might have been the faintest, briefest amusement. Marisol could not be certain, because the Duke did not permit his face to confirm anything. He gestured at the document with 2 fingers, and the firelight caught on the heavy signet ring he wore. "Read it a 3rd time, then. Read it a 10th. The terms will not change." She looked down. The clauses were written in a clerk's tidy hand, and they were brutal in their plainness. The Honorable Marisol Vance, only daughter of the late Sir Edmund Vance of Holmcross, would consent to marry Von Edric Ashcombe, 6th Duke of Witherholm, within 1 calendar month of the signing of this agreement. She would reside at the Duke's principal estate, Briarmoor Hall, until such time as she had borne him a living son. Upon the production of a healthy male heir, she would be granted the dower house at Pembury, an annual income of £2,000, and her freedom to live separately from her husband for the remainder of her natural life. That was the contract. No mention of love, no mention of fondness, no mention of the 7 years she had spent watching her father bleed their family dry through bad investments, or of the fact that without this arrangement, her 2 younger sisters would be sent to live as poor relations in the home of a cousin who hated them. There were no romantic illusions in this room. There was only arithmetic. "You have not asked me a single question about myself," Marisol said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Not one, Your Grace. You came to my uncle's house in Tilbridge. You sat at his table. You ate his fish. And you informed him that you required a wife of acceptable breeding and adequate health. I was produced like a prize calf." The Duke did not answer immediately. He rose from his chair, and the firelight made a long shadow of him across the carpet. He was tall. Not handsome, exactly, in the soft way her younger sister Pernilla swooned over in penny novels, but striking in the way certain old portraits were striking. Hawkish. Granite. Whatever softness he had once possessed had been buried with the people he had loved. "What would you have me ask, Miss Vance?" "Whether I am willing." "I assumed your willingness when you arrived at Briarmoor. The carriage, I am told, was not chained." "I came because my sisters would starve if I did not." "Then you came willing." The cruelty of it was so perfectly composed that for a moment she could not breathe. He was not wrong. That was the worst of it. She had agreed to this in principle in her uncle's drawing room a fortnight ago, but the words spoken aloud in this cold-walled study, with the contract glowing on the desk like an accusation, made her feel as if she had walked into a butcher's shop and asked politely to be weighed. "I'm willing to marry you," she said. "I'm not willing to be invisible to the man who marries me." He studied her then, truly studied her, with the slow, assessing attention that she had been told he reserved for racehorses and disputed parcels of land. She held his gaze. Her father had taught her many useless things, but he had taught her how to hold a man's gaze, and for that one inheritance, she was grateful. "You will not be invisible, Miss Vance," he said at last. "You will be my Duchess. You will be the mother of my heir. You will be addressed as Your Grace by the same people who once would not have admitted you to their drawing rooms. You will not love me. No. You will not pretend to. No. You will come to my chambers when it suits you, and you will leave when it suits you, and we shall meet at breakfast as strangers. That is the substance of the arrangement, yes. And when I have given you a son, you will be free." She laughed. She had not meant to. The sound was small and bitter and entirely outside her control, and she watched it land on him like a flung glove. "Free," she repeated. "I shall be 24 years old, Your Grace, with a son I cannot raise, and a husband who will not speak to me, and you will hand me a deed to a house in the country and call it freedom. It is more freedom than most women of your station ever know. Then most women of my station have been savagely cheated. I have spent the past 7 years nursing a father whose body outlived his sense, and burying a mother whose grief outlived her body, and minding 2 sisters who deserved better than I knew how to be." Now she had truly surprised him. She saw it in the slight tightening at the corner of his mouth. He had expected gratitude. He had expected timidity. He had not expected to be answered. "You are here to bear my heir, Miss Vance," he said quietly, and the coldness of the sentence was somehow worse than any shouted thing he might have said. "Not to debate the philosophy of marriage. Sign the contract." The fire cracked. Somewhere beyond the heavy oak doors, a clock struck the half-hour. Marisol Vance, 23 years old and entirely alone in the world, looked down at the pen the Duke had laid beside the page. She thought of her sisters. Pernilla, who was 16 and already mending the same gown for the 3rd season. Linnea, who was 14 and had not seen a doctor for the cough she had carried since spring. She picked up the pen. She signed her name. And the moment the ink dried on the page, before either of them could speak, a sharp, urgent knocking sounded at the study door, and the Duke's steward burst in without waiting to be admitted, and his face was the color of ash. "Forgive me, Your Grace," the man gasped. "There has been a rider from London. The Dowager has collapsed. They say if you wish to see her alive again, you must leave within the hour, and Miss Vance must come with you." Marisol's hand, still resting on the contract, went very cold. "Why?" she said. "Must I come?" The Duke did not look at her. He was already moving. But he answered as he passed, and his answer was a blade slipped between her ribs. "Because, Miss Vance, my mother insists upon meeting the woman who has agreed to give her a grandson, and she insists upon doing it before she dies." The carriage was the finest she had ever sat in, and Marisol hated it. It was lined in dove-gray velvet. It had a foot warmer that the Duke's valet had filled with hot bricks before they departed Briarmore. It had silver fittings on the door handles and a small writing desk that folded out from the panel beside her elbow. He had not dictated a letter. He had not spoken at all. For 3 hours he had sat opposite her with a sheaf of correspondence on his knee, and he had read each page with the same flat attention he might have given to a list of fence repairs. He had not looked at her. He had not asked whether she was warm enough. He had not asked whether the rocking of the carriage made her ill, which it did. The contract was in her reticule, folded in thirds. She could feel the edge of it pressing against her wrist through the silk. "Your Grace," she said. He turned a page. "Your Grace." "Miss Vance." "How long until we reach London?" "Another 6 hours, conditions permitting." "And do you intend to speak to me at any point during those 6 hours? Or shall I consider this a rehearsal for our marriage?" The page stopped turning. He looked up, slowly, and for a long moment he simply regarded her, the way a man might regard a hawk that had spoken to him in clear English. "I am preparing what I shall say to my mother," he said. "Then I imagine your mother will be charmed to hear it, since you have clearly devoted such labor to its construction." "Miss Vance." "Your Grace." You will find that I am not a man who entertains himself with conversation. I have observed that, yes. Your mother is dying, by your steward's account. She has asked to meet me. I do not know her. I do not know what she has been told of me. I do not know whether she will receive me as a bride or as a broodmare, and I have no intention of arriving at her bedside, knowing nothing of the woman whose blessing I am apparently meant to secure. So you will speak to me, Your Grace, or I shall arrive in London as silent and useless as you presently wish me to be, and my failure will be entirely of your making. The silence that followed was so complete that she could hear the harness creaking. He set the correspondence aside. Her name, he said at last, is Aurelia Margaret Ashcombe. She is 68 years old. She has been a widow for 11 years, and she has buried 2 of her 3 sons. She does not suffer fools. She will judge you within the first 30 seconds of meeting you, and her judgment will be final. What sort of woman does she favor? Honest ones. Then she shall favor me, since I am incapable of any other sort. He almost smiled. She saw the muscle move at the corner of his mouth, and then she saw him kill it. There is one further matter, he said. She does not know the contract exists. Marisol stared. I beg your pardon. She believes I have proposed to you in the ordinary fashion. She believes you have accepted in the ordinary fashion. She believes ours is to be a love match, hastily arranged on account of her illness, so that she might see her son settled before she dies. You have lied to your dying mother. I have spared her. You have lied. Miss Vance, you expect me to perform a love match for a woman on her deathbed. I expect you to be civil and tender for the duration of a single visit, after which we shall return to Briarmore and resume the terms we have agreed. She could not speak. The sheer, breathtaking selfishness of it had stolen her tongue. She had signed a contract not 3 hours ago that named her precisely as a vessel for an heir, and now this man was asking her to gaze at him with adoring eyes and clasp his hand at his mother's bedside, and then climb back into a carriage and resume being his livestock. And if I refuse, she said, you will not refuse. You have 2 sisters. You have signed a contract that secures their futures only so long as you fulfill its terms. There is no clause that requires you to be kind to a dying woman. No. But I should remind you that the dying woman in question is the only person in England whose love I have not yet been deprived of. And if you grant her this one mercy, I shall remember it. Will you? I forget very little. Tell me one further thing, Your Grace. Tell me whether your mother knows that the wife you are bringing home tonight comes from a family whose fortune was lost upon a coal seam that did not exist. She will not ask, Miss Vance. My mother has known your family for 30 years. She knew, I suspect, every penny your father lost before he lost it. And she did not, when I named you to her last week, ask a single question. She said only, bring her to me. So she knows. Marisol could not answer. The carriage struck a deep rut in the road and lurched violently sideways. She, unprepared, was thrown halfway across the compartment. She caught at the velvet strap above the window, missed it, and felt herself falling toward the Duke's side of the carriage with no power to stop. He caught her. He caught her at the waist with both hands, and the strength in his grip was startling, and the sudden warmth of him through the layers of wool and silk was more startling still, and for a single suspended second, her face was inches from his, and the eyes that had been granite all afternoon were not granite at all. They were storm. They were shadow. They were the eyes of a man who had not been touched gently in a very long time, and who had forgotten what to do with the want of it. He set her back on her seat, as though she had burned him. He picked up his correspondence. He did not look at her again. And outside the carriage window, against the black silhouette of the passing trees, the first wet flakes of an unseasonable late snow began to fall. Witherhome House occupied the western corner of Belgrave Square, and it was lit from foundation to roofline when their carriage drew up at the steps. Servants stood in 2 flanking lines on the pavement despite the snow, their breath clouding the air, and in the doorway stood a thin, severe woman in a black housekeeper's dress, whose hands were clasped so tightly that Marisol could see the whiteness of her knuckles even from the carriage. "How long has she been like this?" the Duke asked the moment his boot touched stone. "Since dawn, Your Grace. She's been asking for you every hour. The physician is with her now." "And Lord Cassavane?" A pause. The housekeeper's mouth tightened. "He arrived this afternoon, Your Grace. He is in the green drawing room. He has not been admitted to Her Grace's chamber." The Duke went very, very still. Marisol, descending behind him with her gloved hand in the footman's, felt the change in him without understanding it. The temperature of him dropped. Whatever fragile thing had passed between them in the carriage was gone now, sealed beneath fathoms of ice. "Cassavane is here," he said. "Yes, Your Grace. In my house. He was admitted before I was informed of his presence, Your Grace. By the time I knew, he was already inside. Have him removed." "Your Grace, the Dowager has asked for him." The Duke turned. Slowly, and though he did not raise his voice, the housekeeper flinched as though he had struck her. "My mother is dying, Mrs. Ormsby. She is not herself. You will tell Lord Cassavane that he may wait in the green drawing room until I have determined what is to be done with him, and you will not, under any circumstance, admit him to her chamber until I have spoken with her. You will further station a footman at the foot of her staircase, with instruction that Lord Cassavane is not to ascend it for any reason whatsoever, including the express request of my mother herself, until I have given personal leave. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Your Grace." He swept past her into the house without offering Marisol his arm. She followed because there was nothing else to do. The hall was vast and cold despite the fires. Marble underfoot, a sweeping double staircase carpeted in deep crimson, and an arrangement of white lilies on a pedestal that already, faintly, smelled of funeral. "Your Grace," she said. He did not slow. "Your Grace." "What is it, Miss Vance? Who is Lord Cassavane?" The Duke stopped at the foot of the staircase. He did not turn. "My cousin," he said. "He is the man who would inherit Briarmore and the title and every penny of the Witherhome estate if I were to die without a son. He has been waiting 11 years for me to oblige him in this. He is a charming man, Miss Vance. You will find him very charming. You will not be charmed. Why is he here? Because my mother loves him, and because he has been told I am about to marry, and because he has come to assess the threat. The threat being me. The threat being your future child." A door opened on the upper landing. A small, pale-faced maid descended in great haste, her cap askew, her eyes red. "Your Grace," she gasped, halfway down. "The Dowager is awake. She is asking for you. She is asking that you bring the lady up at once." The Duke turned to Marisol then, and what she saw in his face was not coldness. It was something far worse. It was a man bracing himself. "Miss Vance," he said quietly, "I am about to ask you for something I have no right to ask. My mother believes ours is a love match. She has not long. If she sees in your face for one instant that I have purchased you, she will die knowing her son became the kind of man she warned him against. So I am asking you, not as the Duke who signed a contract with you this morning, but as a man whose mother is dying upstairs, to lie. I will repay any debt you name." Marisol could not speak. She had been ready to refuse him. She had spent the entire ride from the gates of London, preparing the refusal, polishing it, sharpening it. And then he had said the words, "I am asking you," and his voice had broken in a place she had not known he possessed, and the refusal had crumbled in her throat like wet paper. "What is my name to be?" she said. Your own. My history. Your own. Adjusted only where it would wound her. Your father loved you. Your mother lives in the country. You and I met at the Pemberton Ball in October. I noticed you across the room. You found me arrogant. I find you arrogant now. Then it shall be easy to perform. She looked up the staircase. The crimson carpet stretched up into shadow. Somewhere at the top of those stairs lay a woman who had buried 2 sons and a husband, and who was now to be told the lie that her last living son had given his heart away. I shall do it, Marisol said, but not for you. I did not assume otherwise, and there will be a price, Your Grace. Name it. When she is gone, when this performance ends, you will speak to me, not as your Duchess, not as the mother of your future son, as the woman who agreed to lie for you in the worst hour of your life. You will speak to me, Your Grace, the way one human being speaks to another, or this is the last kindness you will have from me. He looked at her, truly looked at her, in a way he had not done in the study at Briarmore, in a way he had not done in the carriage. And for a long moment, Marisol thought he might not answer at all. Agreed, he said. He offered her his arm. She took it, and as they began to climb the great crimson staircase together, with the snow falling softly on the windows and the lilies smelling sweet and wrong in the hall behind them, the door at the top of the stairs opened, and a man stepped out onto the landing whom Marisol had never seen before, and his smile, when it found her, was the most beautiful and the most terrible thing she had ever beheld. Cousin, he said warmly to the Duke, and this must be the bride. Lord Cassavane Ashcombe was beautiful in the way old portraits of saints were beautiful. Pale gold hair, worn slightly long, a face composed of clean, generous lines, eyes the color of weak tea, warm where the Duke's were gray and cold. He was perhaps 30 years old. He wore mourning gray already, even though no one had yet died, and Marisol understood within 3 breaths of meeting him that this was a man who prepared his costumes carefully. He had come down from the upper landing without permission, which meant he had passed the footman the housekeeper had stationed there, which meant he had used the back stair, which meant he had been waiting for them. Vaughn, he said, descending 2 stairs to greet them. I came as quickly as I could. The news reached me in Bath this morning. How is she? Asking for me, the Duke said. Step aside. The cousin did not step aside. He turned the full warmth of his attention upon Marisol instead, and his hand caught hers before she had thought to refuse it, and he bowed over her glove with a courtier's grace. Forgive my cousin's manners, he said. Grief makes him brusque. I am Cassavane Ashcombe. And you, my lady, must be the woman who has accomplished what no one in this family believed possible. You have made Vaughn willing to marry. Miss Marisol Vance, she said. Vance. He paused over the name, smiling. Vance of Holme Cross? I knew your father a little years ago. He had a fine eye for a horse and very poor judgment in coal investments. You have his cheekbones. You presume a great deal upon a single landing, my lord. Ah, his smile widened. She bites. Vaughn, you sly old wolf. The Duke's jaw was so tight that Marisol could see the muscle move beneath the skin. He took a half-step forward, and Cassavane released her hand and stepped aside. Mother is awake, the Duke said. I know. I have been waiting all afternoon to be permitted to see her. You will be permitted when I have spoken to her first. Wait in the green drawing room. Vaughn, she asked for me. She asks for many things she does not know she is asking for. Wait in the green drawing room, or wait outside. But you will not enter that chamber before I do. Are we understood, cousin? A pause. Then Cassavane bowed, slow and elegant, and the bow was directed at Marisol rather than at the Duke. Miss Vance, he said, I shall hope to make your better acquaintance once the household is calmer. He withdrew. He did not hurry. He took the corridor toward the back of the house, with the unhurried elegance of a man who had never in his life been forbidden anything that he had not eventually obtained. And the moment the door at the end of the passage closed behind him, the Duke exhaled a breath Marisol suspected he had been holding since the carriage. "Do not," he said, very low, "be alone with him. He is your cousin. He is precisely my cousin. Do not be alone with him, Miss Vance, not in any house, not in a garden, not in a corridor. If he speaks to you, you will answer briefly, and then you will find me. Your Grace, you are bruising my arm." He looked down. He had taken hold of her elbow without realizing it. He released her at once, and Marisol watched his hand close into a fist at his side, as if he were ashamed of the place it had just been. "Forgive me," he said. "Tell me what he is," she said. "Plainly. Now, before I walk into a sick room and speak words to a dying woman that I cannot take back." The Duke looked up the staircase. The maid had withdrawn. The corridor above was empty and silent, and somewhere behind the paneling, a clock was ticking with the soft, remorseless patience of all clocks in houses where someone is dying. "He is the man," the Duke said quietly, "who was driving the carriage that overturned with my brother Edric inside it 11 years ago. He survived. Edric did not. Cassie Vaughn was 20 years old. He had been drinking. He has been the heir presumptive to Witherholm ever since, and he has been my mother's most attentive nephew, my most charming cousin, and the last man on this earth I would permit to inherit a single brick of Briarmoor. Now go up those stairs with me, Miss Vance, and be the bride my mother needs you to be." Marisol could not speak. She placed her hand on his arm. They climbed the staircase together. The dowager's chamber smelled of camphor and roses. A great canopied bed dominated the far wall, hung in faded blue silk, and within it lay a woman who had once been very tall and was now folded smaller than seemed possible. Her hair the color of pewter, her hands resting on the coverlet like two thin birds who had stopped trying. Her eyes, when she opened them, were the same pale gray as her son's. They found Marisol first. "Come closer, child," she said. Marisol approached. The Duke remained at the door. She knelt at the bedside, and the dowager's hand, when it touched her cheek, was cold and dry and weightless, and yet the touch was not weak. There was a long, considering moment in which Aurelia Ashcombe looked into Marisol's face, the way a jeweler looks into a stone, and Marisol, who had been bracing herself to lie, found that she could not look away. "You are frightened," the dowager said. "Yes, your Grace." "Of me?" "Of failing you." The old woman's mouth lifted at one corner. It was the Duke's almost smile, Marisol realized. It was where he had inherited it. "Honest girl," Aurelia murmured. "Vaughn, come here." The Duke came. He knelt on the other side of the bed, and his mother took his hand in her bird-like one, and laid it across Marisol's, where it rested on the coverlet, so that mother and son and bride all touched. "I'm dying, Vaughn." "Mother." "Hush. I'm dying, and I'm not afraid, and I have one thing left to ask of you, and you will not refuse me. I understand. Promise me you will love this girl." The room went very still. Marisol felt the Duke's hand tighten upon hers. She did not look at him. She kept her eyes on the dowager's face, on the faint trembling of the dry lips, on the absolute and terrible certainty in her gaze. "Mother," the Duke said, and his voice was hoarse. "Promise me, Vaughn." A long silence. "I promise," he said. The dowager closed her eyes. She smiled, and in the corner of the room, where Marisol had not noticed him entering, where he had no leave to be, and where the Duke had given explicit instruction that he should not be admitted, Lord Cassavane Ashcombe stood quietly against the paneling with both hands folded behind his back, watching them, and the smile on his face wasn't warm at all. The dowager slept. The physician returned and felt her pulse and shook his head, not in despair, but in the cautious surprise of a man who had been expecting to lose a patient an hour ago and had now been granted an unexplained reprieve. She might wake at dawn. She might not wake at all. She might linger 3 days. He could not say. He never could. With the strong-willed ones. The Duke ordered Cassavane removed from the chamber. Cassavane went without protest. He paused only to bow once more to Marisol and to murmur, near her ear, as he passed. "If you find you require someone to speak honestly with, Miss Vance, I am in the green drawing room. The Duke does not visit it." Then he was gone, and Marisol and the Duke were alone in the corridor with the soft, steady ticking of the unseen clock. He did not speak. He walked. She followed, because he had not dismissed her, and because she did not know the house, and because she was suddenly, terribly tired. He led her to a small green parlor 2 floors below the sick room. A fire had been lit. A tray of cold meats and bread had been set on a side table, untouched. He closed the door behind them, and only then did he turn to face her, and only then did she see how white he had gone. "You promised her you would love me," she said. "Yes. You will not. No. Then you have lied to a dying woman." "Yes, Miss Vance. I have lied to a dying woman. We have established this is the kind of man I am. Was there a further accusation, or shall we have done with it?" She had not meant to wound him. She had meant only to name the thing that had happened in that room, because if she did not name it, she felt that she would scream. But the wound had landed anyway, and she watched the Duke turn his back upon her and brace both hands against the mantel, and his shoulders were so rigid beneath the dark wool of his coat that for a moment she thought he might break. "Forgive me," she said. "No. You owe me nothing, Miss Vance. Not forgiveness. Not softness. Not the easing of a single moment of this. I have asked too much of you already today, and I shall ask more before this night is out, and there will come an hour, before we are done, when you will hate me with a clarity that will frighten us both. I would prefer to spend my apologies on that hour, when you will need them more." She did not know what to say to that. She crossed to the fire. She held her hands out to it, because they were cold, because she could not look at his back any longer without saying something she could not unsay. "Tell me about Edric," she said. He did not answer for a long time. "My younger brother," he said at last. "By 2 years. He was not like me. He was warm. He laughed easily. He read poetry aloud to anyone who would sit still long enough to be subjected to it. He was to have inherited a small estate in Devon from our great aunt, and he was very happy about it, because it meant he could marry a girl he had loved since he was 16, a vicar's daughter, entirely unsuitable, and our father was furious about it, and Edric did not care. He said love was the only inheritance worth claiming. He was 22 years old when Cassavane drove him into a ditch on the Bath Road at 3 o'clock in the morning. And the vicar's daughter? She married a curate within the year. I do not blame her. And your other brother? He turned then. He looked at her, and his eyes were no longer storm. They were ash. Hadrian was the youngest. He was 12 when Edric died. He never recovered from it. He took a fever at 15 and would not fight it. The physician said he had simply decided, some quiet morning, not to. I sat with him for 3 days at the end. He asked me to promise that I would not let our family disappear. I promised. I have kept that promise for 8 years. It is the only promise I have left to keep. And so you signed a contract with me. And so I signed a contract with you. Because if you do not produce a son, the man who killed your brother inherits everything your brother died loving. Yes. She closed her eyes. She understood him now. She wished she did not. It would have been easier to remain angry with a granite man whose coldness was simple cruelty. It was far harder to be angry with a man who had been hollowed out by grief and had filled the hollow with duty, because she knew what it was to do that. She had done it herself. in the 7 years since her father had begun his long drowning into debt. "Your Grace," she said. "Vaughn." She opened her eyes. "My name," he said, very quietly, "is Vaughn. I have not heard anyone use it in 11 years except my mother, and she will not use it for very much longer. I do not ask you to use it. I tell you only that it exists, in case there should ever come a moment when you wish to." She did not speak. She could not. And then the door of the green parlor opened without a knock, and Cassavone stood in the doorway with a glass of brandy in one hand and that same beautiful, terrible smile upon his face, and he said pleasantly, "Forgive me. I had not realized the room was occupied. Miss Vance, I wonder if I might have a private word with you about a matter that concerns your future. It will only take a moment." The Duke did not move. He stood where he had been standing, at the green parlor fireplace, and Marisol understood without being told that this was a negotiation. To order Cassavone out of the room was to admit Cassavone had power. To remain was to permit him to deliver, in the Duke's presence, whatever he had come to deliver. There was no good answer. There was only the answer that revealed less. "I'm at Lord Cassavane's disposal," Marisol said, "for as long as my future husband permits." The Duke's eyes flicked to her. There was something in them she could not read. "5 minutes," he said. "Most generous, cousin. Miss Vance, would you take a turn with me? The conservatory is just along the corridor. The plants will not eavesdrop." She rose. She placed her hand upon Cassavane's offered arm, because to refuse the arm would be to make a scene. He led her down a passage hung with portraits of dead Ashcombs, and through a low arched door, and into a long glass room full of orange trees and the heavy wet warmth of growing things. The door closed behind them. He released her arm. "How much do you know?" he said pleasantly. "About my cousin's first betrothal." She did not answer. "Ah." He plucked a small green orange from the nearest tree and turned it in his fingers. "He has not told you. Did you know, Miss Vance, that he was engaged once before? 6 years ago, to a young lady named Honoria Tremaine. The match was settled. The contracts were drawn. The wedding was set for September. And then in August, 3 weeks before the ceremony, Miss Tremaine wrote to him from her aunt's house in Tunbridge Wells and asked to be released from the engagement. And he released her, and she married a barrister within the season. And he has not, to my knowledge, courted any woman since. Until you. This is not a kindness, my lord. It is information. Information is sometimes the only kindness available. Do you know why she ended it? I do not wish to. Because she said in the letter that she could not bear to spend her life beside a man who did not feel things. She said she had stood beside him at 3 funerals in the year of their engagement, and at none of them had he wept, and at none of them had he reached for her, and she had concluded that he was not capable of love, and that she, being a young woman who wished to be loved, was therefore not capable of marriage to him. Marisol said nothing. She had known this man for less than a day. She had no business defending him. And yet something in her chest moved violently against the smooth, sweet voice in the conservatory, against the cousin who had brought her here precisely because the Duke had told her not to be alone with him. "You came to assess me, my lord," she said quietly. "I see that now. So permit me to assess you. You have come into your aunt's house in the hour of her dying to wave a 6-year-old letter at the woman your cousin intends to marry, in the hope that I shall break the engagement, refuse the marriage, return to my uncle's house in Tilbridge, and leave the Witherhome inheritance unguarded for 1 further generation. Have I understood you?" The orange paused. The tea-colored eyes lifted to her face. "You are a clever girl, Miss Vance. And you are a careless one, my lord, if you imagined I could be unsettled by a story about a woman 6 years old. I have older grief than that in my own house." He laughed. It was a soft laugh, genuinely amused, and it frightened her more than his smile had done. "Very well," he said. "I shall be plain with you, since plainness is what you respect. I do not believe you love him. I do not believe he loves you. I believe a contract has been signed, my dear, and I believe that contract specifies that you shall provide a son in exchange for security. Do not deny it. I have seen the look of a girl who has been sold, and I am looking at one now. I know the look because my own sister wore it once, and her husband killed her with it inside 3 years, and I shall not see another woman worn down to nothing in the service of the Ashcombe name. So I am offering you, Miss Vance, an alternative." "What alternative?" "Walk out of this house tonight. I shall arrange a carriage. I shall arrange an income. I shall settle upon your sisters a sum greater than anything Vaughn has promised you, and I shall ask nothing of you in return except your absence. I do not require a wife. I do not require an heir. I require only that the contract you have signed be torn up before a child is conceived, because once that child exists, my dear, it will be too late for both of us, and you will spend the rest of your life as the woman who breeds for a man who cannot love you." She stared at him. For one long, dreadful instant she believed him. It was not because she wanted to. It was because every word he had spoken was, in some terrible manner, half true. The Duke had not loved her in his study. He would not love her in his bed. He had told her so himself, with a frankness she had thought, foolishly, that she admired. And then she remembered the Duke's voice in the green parlor, breaking very softly upon a single word. "Vaughn." "My lord," she said. "Yes, my dear. You will hand me back to the Duke now, and you will hand me back without touching me, and you will pray very hard, between this hour and the hour of your death, that I do not repeat to him a single word you have said in this room, because I have understood you, my lord. I have understood you entirely. You did not kill your cousin Edric on purpose. I believe that. But you have been killing him slowly for 11 years, in every room of this family that you can reach, and I am not the woman you mistook me for, and I shall not assist you." She did not wait for his answer. She walked past him to the conservatory door. She placed her hand upon the latch, and from the corridor beyond, very near, very still, came the soft, unmistakable sound of a man's slow, controlled breathing, and Marisol understood, with her hand frozen on the latch, that the Duke of Witherholm had been standing on the other side of the glass for some time. She opened the door. The Duke was not standing directly outside it. He had withdrawn perhaps 3 paces down the corridor, and he was facing one of the dim portraits as though he had been examining it for some time, and his hands were clasped behind his back in the careful way of a man who did not trust them loose. He did not turn when the conservatory door opened. He did not turn when Casaubon emerged behind her, with the small green orange still in his fingers and a face that betrayed nothing at all. "Cousin," Casaubon said pleasantly, "I trust we have not delayed you." "Not at all. Did you know your gardener has been pruning the orange trees too aggressively? They will not fruit in another 2 seasons if he persists. I shall speak to him." "Generous, cousin." "I am, on occasion." Casaubon bowed to Marisol, slow and elegant and perfect, and walked away down the corridor without hurry. He did not look back. The orange went into his coat pocket with the careless grace of a man who had decided, for now, to wait. The sound of his footsteps faded into the deep silence of the great house, and only when she could no longer hear them did the Duke finally turn around. He looked at her. He did not speak. She did not speak. Whatever he had heard through the conservatory wall, he was not going to name it, and Marisol understood without explanation that this was a kindness. To name the thing she had said in there would be to require her to mean it twice, and he was not going to require that of her. "Your hand is bleeding," he said. She looked down. She had pressed too hard against the brass latch of the conservatory door, and a thin line of red had risen across the heel of her palm, where her glove had split. She had not felt it. She felt it now, hot and stinging, and the sight of the blood on the pale kid leather was somehow more shocking than the blood itself. "It is nothing," she said. "Come." He took her elbow. Not hard. He led her not back to the green parlor, but further along the corridor, to a small door she had not noticed, and through it into a room she had not expected. It was a library, a small one, lined to the ceiling on 3 walls, with books bound in worn leather, and at the far end, a single window of small leaded panes, through which the snow could be seen still falling against the black glass. A fire had been laid, but not lit. A lamp burned low on a writing desk. "This was Edric's," he said. She looked at him. "He read here. He kept his own books here. I have not changed the room since he died." She did not know what to say. She closed her hand around the bleeding palm and held it against her skirt. He went to the desk. He opened a drawer. He took from it a small folded square of fine linen and a small green glass bottle. He set the bottle upon a side table, took her wounded hand in his without asking permission, and gently stripped the ruined glove from her fingers. She did not breathe. He did not look up at her face. He turned her hand palm upward in his own, and he uncorked the bottle with his teeth, and he poured a small amount of clear liquid onto the linen, and he pressed it to the cut. It stung. She did not let herself flinch. He held her hand steady in his, and his thumb rested against the inside of her wrist, against the place where her pulse was hammering against the skin so hard she was certain he could feel it. He must have felt it. He did not remark upon it. "It is shallow," he said. "Yes. It will not scar. No. Miss Vance, Your Grace, you have not told me to release your hand. I am aware." He looked up then. He looked at her over their joined hands, and his face was very close, and the firelight from the lamp was very low, and the snow was coming down hard now beyond the leaded glass, and Marisol understood, with a clarity that frightened her, that she had crossed a threshold inside herself in the conservatory and could not step back across it. She had defended this man. She had told Cassavane Ashcombe to his face that she would not be the instrument of his slow revenge, and she had meant it. She did not love him. She did not. It was too soon, and too foolish, and too dangerous. But she had begun to know him, and the knowing was already too much. "Vaughn," she said. It was the first time she had used the name, and she felt his hand close around hers as if she had struck him. He did not pull away. He did not pull her closer. He simply held her hand, and his thumb did not move from her wrist, and for one long, suspended moment, they stood in his dead brother's library, while the snow fell against the window, and the truth of what was happening between them sat between them on the desk, beside the small green bottle, and neither of them named it. Then the door opened. It was the housekeeper, Mrs. Ormsby, very pale, very breathless, holding a candle in a hand that shook. "Your Grace," she said. "The Dowager is awake. She is asking for you both. She says she has changed her mind. She will not die tonight. She has decided that she would like very much to see you married, Your Grace, in this house before the week is out, by special license." The Duke did not move. He did not let go of her hand. "By the end of the week," Marisol repeated. "Yes, miss. Your Grace. Yes, miss." Marisol turned her face up to Vaughn Ashcombe, and she saw in his expression the same calm, terrible, overtaken stillness she had seen in him on the steps of his own house, when he had been told that Cassavane was already inside. He did not look frightened. He looked instead like a man who had been preparing for a single fight all his life, and had been informed, quite suddenly, that the fight had already begun. "Tell my mother," he said quietly to the housekeeper, without removing his eyes from Marisol's face, "that Miss Vance and I shall come up to her in 5 minutes, and that whatever she has decided, we shall be honored to obey." The door closed. The snow fell. And Marisol, with her hand still in his, understood that she was about to be married within the week to a man whose first name she had spoken aloud only moments before, and whose hand she had not yet been able to bring herself to release. The dowager's chamber smelled different in the night. The camphor was the same. The roses were the same. But someone had opened the great window, a hand's breadth, to let in the cold winter air, and the cold had carried the camphor higher into the canopy of the bed and pushed the roses lower toward the floor, and the room felt less like a sick room now and more like a chapel in which a decision had been made. Aurelia Ashcombe was sitting up. She had been propped against 3 great pillows by her maid, and her pewter hair had been brushed and rebraided and laid across her shoulder, and there was, astonishingly, a faint flush of color high on her cheekbones. Her eyes were entirely clear. They found Marisol and Vaughn the moment the door opened, and they did not waver. "Come," she said. "Both of you. Sit. Vaughn, take the chair. Miss Vance, sit upon the bed beside me. Closer." Marisol obeyed. The mattress dipped under her weight, and the dowager's bird-like hand came at once to rest upon her knee. "I have had," Aurelia said, "a most useful afternoon of dying. I recommend it. One sees things very plainly. I have been listening to my son walk up and down the corridor for the past 2 hours, and I have decided that I shall not, in fact, oblige any of you by perishing tonight. I find I have a great deal of interfering left to do. Mother." "Hush, Vaughn. I am speaking to your bride." "Miss Vance." "Yes, Your Grace." "I shall ask you a question, and you shall answer it honestly, because I am dying slowly enough to require honesty, and quickly enough to make the asking polite. Did my son sign a contract with you?" Marisol could not breathe. Vaughn went very still in his chair. "I shall take that as yes," the dowager said calmly. "Do not look so stricken, child. I have been the wife of a duke and the mother of 3 sons. I am not a fool. The 2 of you walked into this room 6 hours ago like creatures who had been introduced that morning. My son has not, to my knowledge, met a strange woman without speaking unprompted to her in 17 years, and yet he held your hand on the coverlet as if he had been instructed in what to do with it. I knew when he placed your hand under mine, and I asked him to promise me he would love you because I wished to know what he would do. Mother, please." "Hush. He promised, Miss Vance. He did not have to. He could have lied. He could have said yes, of course, and meant nothing. But you saw his face. And so did I. He meant it. He meant it as a vow. He did not know he meant it. He may not know it now. But I know it. And I am dying. And I shall not waste my remaining hours pretending I do not know it. So listen to me, the both of you, because I shall say this once. Vaughn, you will marry this girl by special license within the week. That part is decided. But you will not marry her on the terms of your contract. You will marry her on the terms of the promise you made me in this room 6 hours ago. You will marry her as a man marries the woman he intends to love, and you will earn the loving of her every day. And if you do not, I shall come back from the grave and box your ears, as I did when you were 9. Are we clear, Mother? Are we clear, Vaughn? We are clear, Miss Vance. Yes, Your Grace. You are not obliged to accept this. The contract you signed is, I imagine, ungenerous. I shall provide for your sisters myself, regardless of what you decide. I have already instructed my solicitor. The carriage that brought you here will return you to your uncle in the morning if you wish, and I shall die with no grievance against you, and Vaughn will live with no claim upon you. So tell me, child, do you wish to leave? Marisol opened her mouth. She did not know what she had been going to say. She looked across the bed at Vaughn Ashcombe, and he wasn't looking at her, and his face was the face of a man who had decided that he would not influence the answer by so much as a glance, He was staring at his hands. His hands were trembling. She had not seen them tremble before. "No, Your Grace," Marisol said. "I do not wish to leave." The Dowager smiled. "Good," she said. "Now, both of you go away and let me sleep. And Miss Vance, you will tell my son, before this night is out, that you have not been bought, and you will tell him in such a way that he believes you. Because if there is one thing my son has ever been bad at, it is permitting himself to be loved. Go." They went. They walked together down the corridor without speaking, and Vaughn opened the door of the small library, his brother Edric's library, and Marisol followed him in and closed the door behind them. The fire had been lit. The snow still fell against the leaded glass. Vaughn did not turn around. He stood in the center of the room with his back to her, and his hands were still trembling, and Marisol crossed to him and stopped behind him, and laid her bandaged hand against his back, between his shoulder blades, where she could feel his heart hitting the wall of his ribs like a fist. "Vaughn," she said. "Do not." "Vaughn." Marisol. It was the first time he had spoken her name, and the saying of it cracked something loose in him. He turned. He took her face in both his hands, and his hands were no longer trembling, and his eyes were not granite or storm or ash, but something newer and entirely undefended. And he looked at her as a man looks at a thing he has been forbidden, and he did not kiss her. He pressed his forehead to hers. "I have not been touched in 11 years, he said. "I know. I do not know how to do this. I know. I am going to ruin it. You are not. Marisol." "Vaughn, stop talking." She lifted her face. He found her mouth. The kiss was not desperate. It was slow and frightened and precise, and it tasted of a man who was learning, with great gravity, that he was permitted to want something. His hand came up and rested against the back of her neck and stayed there, not pulling, only holding. When at last he drew back, neither of them spoke. He took her hand. He led her to the worn leather chair beside the fire. He sat. He drew her down beside him, not into his lap, only against him, her cheek against the wool of his coat, his arm around her shoulders. The fire burned. The snow fell. Two people sat very still in a dead man's library and learned, in the silence, the sound of one another's breathing. He did not beg her to stay. Not yet. But she felt him already beginning to. She woke in the chair. The fire had burned down to dark red coals. A blanket had been laid across her knees, a heavy traveling rug she did not remember accepting. The chair beside her was empty. The library was empty. The leaded window showed the first thin gray of dawn through a sky still spitting snow, and somewhere in the house, a door had just closed. She knew, before she rose, that it had closed upon him. She found him in the breakfast room. He had bathed. He had shaved. He was dressed in fresh linen and a coat she had not seen before, dark gray and severely cut, and he was standing at the sideboard with a cup of coffee that he was not drinking. The newspaper lay folded beside the cup, untouched. A footman was in the room. 2 maids were in the room. The door to the corridor was open. He had arranged the morning so that they would not be alone. "Miss Vance," he said. She stopped in the doorway. "Good morning, Your Grace." "I trust you slept." "Tolerably, Your Grace." "There is coffee. There is chocolate. There is bread. Please, sit." She sat. The footman poured her chocolate. The chocolate was exquisite. She did not taste it. "My mother," the Duke said, "has had a quiet night. The physician has been. He is cautiously hopeful. The license has been applied for. I have written to your uncle in Tilbridge, and a carriage will be dispatched this morning to bring your sisters to London, where they shall reside in this house until the wedding, after which they shall return with you to Briarmore for as long as you wish. I trust this is acceptable." "It is more than acceptable, Your Grace." "Good." He did not look at her. He had not looked at her since she entered the room. "Your Grace," she said. "Miss Vance, Last night, he said evenly, addressing the silver coffee pot, was a great deal for both of us. My mother had received a sentence of death and was reprieved within an hour. You had been asked to perform a public lie of consequence. Neither of us was in a state to be trusted with our own conduct. I shall not, this morning, hold you to anything that occurred between the hour she released us and the hour you slept. I trust you will extend me the same courtesy." The chocolate cup was very heavy in her hand. She set it down. "You are dismissing it," she said. "I am preserving it." "You are dismissing it, Your Grace. You are sitting at the head of your own breakfast table with 3 servants arranged about us as a chaperone, and you are speaking to me as though we had met yesterday on a London pavement. And you have not looked at me once since I entered this room, and I am not the woman, Your Grace, who will be satisfied by the word preserving. Miss Vance, you are afraid. I am cautious. You are afraid. You promised your mother you would love me, and last night in your brother's library, you began to, and at some hour before dawn, you woke in that chair with my head upon your shoulder, and you saw what you had done, and you have spent the hours since arranging this room so that I cannot reach you across it. Look at me, Vaughn." He turned. He looked at her, and the color of his eyes had been put back behind the granite, and Marisol felt the same cold that she had felt in his study at Briarmoor 24 hours ago. "I am the Duke of Witherholm," he said quietly. "I have buried 2 brothers and a father. I have a mother who will, in spite of last night, die within the year. I have an estate that depends upon my producing a son before the man who killed my brother inherits the right to walk through its rooms. I have signed a contract with you in good faith. I shall honor it. I shall marry you within the week. I shall behave toward you in public and in private, with every courtesy a husband owes a wife. But I cannot, this morning, promise you what my mother required of me last night, and I shall not stand in this room and pretend that I can. I am sorry. Eat. The chocolate is from Vienna. It does not deserve to grow cold." He bowed. He left the room. He did not look back. Marisol sat alone in the breakfast room of Witherholm House, with 3 servants pretending to be furniture. And she did not weep, because the daughter of Edmund Vance of Holmcross had been raised never to weep in front of staff. But she set her hands flat upon the polished wood of the table on either side of her plate, and she pressed down upon it until her knuckles whitened, and she breathed, and she breathed, and she did not let herself break. The footman cleared his throat. "Miss Vance," he said. "Beg pardon. There is a gentleman at the front door asking for you, Lord Cassavane Ashcombe. He says he has come to convey his felicitations on the engagement, and to deliver a small gift, and to assure himself of your continued well-being. The Duke has not yet returned from the stables. Shall I admit him?" She closed her eyes. She opened them. "Yes," she said. "Admit him. I shall receive him in the morning room, and send word to the Duke at the stables that his cousin has called, and that I am with him, and that I shall expect his Grace to attend us at his earliest convenience." The footman bowed. He left, and Marisol Vance, the future Duchess of Witherholm, rose from the breakfast table with the chocolate cup still steaming beside her plate, and went to meet the man who had told her in a conservatory that she had been bought. And she went to meet him alone, because the Duke who had bought her had walked out of the room, and she had decided, in the whitening of her knuckles upon the polished wood, that she would not be the one who waited. The morning room of Witherholm House was painted the color of the inside of a robin's egg, and the small fire in its grate had been freshly built, and Lord Cassavane Ashcombe was standing at the window, with his hands clasped loosely behind his back, watching the snow when she entered. He turned. He was dressed beautifully, country dark, riding boots polished to a wet shine, a small white flower in his lapel that she suspected had cost a footman an unpleasant excursion to Covent Garden in the dark. He held a slim, flat package in one hand, wrapped in pale blue paper and tied with a length of silver cord. And when he saw her, he smiled and bowed precisely the same elegant bow. "Miss Vance, Lord Cassavane, forgive the early hour. I should not normally call before noon, but I had heard, from a maid I happened to encounter in a corridor last night, on my way out of the house, that a special license had been applied for, and I could not in good conscience permit the day to pass without offering my felicitations to the bride. You overheard the housekeeper speaking to a maid. I did not say I overheard. You implied a maid spoke to you of her own volition. She did not. Mrs. Ormsby spoke to her. You stood somewhere, you were not seen, and listened. Do not insult me with the fiction that this house gossips about its mistress to her cousin-in-law." He inclined his head. "You are correct. I apologize. I overheard. Sit down, my lord, or do not. I shall not pretend you are a guest." He did not sit. He held out the wrapped package instead, and when she did not move to take it, he set it gently upon the small round table between them and stepped back. "A wedding gift," he said. "Open it now or later, as suits you. I shall not be opening it at all. As you wish. What do you want?" He looked at her for a long, quiet moment, and then he did something that surprised her. He sat. He sat in one of the small, upholstered chairs by the fire without being invited, and he folded his hands across his knee, and the fine, handsome face seemed, just for an instant, to be tired. "Miss Vance," he said, "I have come to apologize." "For what, my lord?" "For yesterday, for the conservatory, for the orange, for the very ungenerous offer I made to you, the form of which I have regretted all night. I had thought, when I made it, that I was offering you a kindness. I see now that I was offering you an insult, and I should like to offer instead a true kindness. Will you permit me?" She did not answer. He took it as permission. "I have written," he said, "to a friend of mine, a gentleman of the press, a brief and entirely factual account of an engagement contract recently signed at Briarmoor Hall between the Duke of Witherholm and a Miss Marisol Vance of Holmcross, the terms of which include the production of a male heir within a specified period of years. I have not yet sent the letter. It is on my writing desk in my rooms in Half Moon Street. The post is not collected from my building until 2 o'clock this afternoon. Should the letter be in my hand at 2 o'clock when the postboy arrives, it will travel with him. Should it not, it will not." She did not move. "I am not, Miss Vance, asking you to leave my cousin. I have heard you on the subject of leaving him. I shall not waste my morning on a request you have already refused. I am asking you, instead, for 1/4 of an hour with the Dowager, alone, in her chamber, before noon today. That is all. 1/4 of an hour. I shall not distress her. I shall sit beside her bed. I shall hold her hand. And I shall say goodbye to my aunt, who has loved me since I was a boy, and whose son refuses to permit me into her presence, even though she has asked for me, and I shall come away. No one need know. And the letter on my desk shall burn this afternoon in my own grate, and no editor in London shall ever know that the Duke of Witherholm purchased his bride." Marisol's hands were very cold. The hateful, perfect cleverness of it lay in the smallness of the request. He was not asking her to leave. He was not asking her to break the engagement. He was asking only for 15 minutes alone with a dying woman, and the asking sounded almost reasonable. "The Duke," she said, "has forbidden it." "The Duke is not in the room with us, Miss Vance. The Duke has, I am told, gone to the stables. I am not attempting to provoke you. I am observing only that the Duke is a man, like any other, and like any other, he is occasionally absent from the rooms in which decisions must be made. You are asking me to betray him. I'm asking you to be merciful to a dying old woman. You are asking me to betray him, my lord, and you have wrapped the asking in the body of an old woman, so that I cannot refuse without seeming cruel. I see you, Lord Cassavine. I saw you yesterday. I see you again today. The answer is no. He did not move. Then I am very sorry, he said, for what shall be in the morning papers tomorrow. Good day, Miss Vance. He rose. He bowed. He walked to the door. He had reached it, and his hand was upon the handle, when the door opened in his face from the corridor side, and the Duke stood there, hatless, his greatcoat still on, his boots wet with stable mud, and his eyes were no longer ash or storm or anything she had a name for. They were murder. Cousin, he said quietly, I believe you were leaving. Cassavine stepped back from the door. He did it gracefully. He always did everything gracefully. But Marisol saw the small, involuntary tightening at the corner of his mouth. He had not expected the Duke to be already inside the morning room. He had been wrong. Vaughn, he said, I was paying my respects to your bride. You will pay them to me instead. Miss Vance, would you withdraw? No. The Duke turned his head a fraction. He looked at her for the first time since the breakfast room. Marisol. I shall not withdraw, Your Grace. He has come to threaten me. He has named the threat aloud in this room, and there is a letter in his rooms in Half Moon Street, which he intends to send at 2 o'clock this afternoon to a gentleman of the press, unless I admit him to your mother's chamber for a quarter of an hour before noon. And I told him no, and I shall hear what is said next, or I shall not be able to bear the rest of this day. The room went very still. Cassavine's smile did not waver, but something behind it did. Marisol watched the calculation pass across his face, the rapid weighing of how much she could possibly know, and how much it was now worth attempting to deny. He arrived at his answer. The smile widened slightly. Miss Vance has a remarkable imagination, he said. Has she? The Duke said. She has misunderstood a friendly conversation. Has she? Cousin. Cassavine. The Duke did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He took 2 steps into the room, and Cassavine, without appearing to retreat, found himself somehow against the small writing desk in the corner, with his back to the wallpaper, and the Duke standing where the doorway used to be. Cassavine, the Duke said, I have something to tell you. I have been carrying it for 11 years. But you have walked into my house in the hour of my mother's dying, and you have offered my future wife a private settlement in my conservatory, and you have stood this morning in my morning room, and you have threatened her with the public ruin of her name, and I find, cousin, that the carrying has grown tedious. Shall I tell you what I know? Vaughn. Edric did not die in the carriage. The room stopped. Marisol felt her own breath stop with it. She watched Cassavine's face, and she understood only that Cassavine had gone the color of old paper. He did not die in the carriage, Cassavine. He was killed by the blow to the temple that you administered to him with a coachman's whip handle on the side of the road afterward, when you discovered that he was still breathing, because you had drunk most of a bottle of port, and you were afraid of what he would say to our father in the morning. The coroner's man saw the injury. He told my father. My father paid him for his silence, and paid you, by the grace of his will, the silence of a presumptive heir. I was 19 years old at the time. I learned of it in the 3rd year of mourning. I sat upon it for 8 further years, because my mother was in fragile health, and the scandal would have destroyed her. I have a sworn statement from the coroner's man in a strongbox in my study at Briarmore. I have a 2nd copy in the keeping of my solicitor. I have a 3rd copy, this morning, with a friend of mine in Doctors' Commons. Should anything appear in any newspaper in London tomorrow morning concerning Miss Vance or the terms of our engagement, those statements will be at the magistrate's office in Bow Street by sunset. And you, cousin, will hang. Cassavine did not speak. He could not. His mouth had opened and produced no sound. His hands, which had been so beautifully clasped behind his back upon the staircase yesterday, hung at his sides as though they didn't belong to him. "You will leave this house," the Duke said softly. "You will go to Half Moon Street. You will burn the letter you have written. You will take the next mail packet to Calais, and you will live, cousin, in a city that I shall name, on an income that I shall calculate, for the rest of your natural life. You will not return to England. You will not write to my mother. You will not, in any letter or in any conversation, speak the name of Miss Vance. You will be permitted to live, Cassivine. Do you accept it?" A long silence. "Yes," Cassivine whispered. "Then go." He went. He walked to the door of the morning room with the careful steps of a man who was not certain his legs were still attached to him, and he passed through it. And the front door of Witherholm House opened and closed in the great hall, and a horse was heard upon the gravel, and then there was nothing. The Duke did not move. He stood in the middle of the morning room for a long moment, with his hands at his sides and the stable mud drying upon his boots. And he did not look at her, and Marisol understood that he was deciding whether he was permitted to. "Vaughn," she said, "Marisol, you knew. All this time. You knew. Yes. And you let him into your mother's house. He is her sister's son. She loves him. She will die loving him. I shall not take that from her at the end. I have managed him for 11 years. I had thought I could manage him through one more week. He came for me, Vaughn. I know. He would have ruined me. He would not have. I would not have permitted it. You walked out of the breakfast room. I went to the stables to write a letter to my solicitor, instructing him that the contract you signed at Briarmore is to be destroyed this afternoon, that a new settlement is to be drawn up in its place, that you are to be granted, at the moment of our marriage, the dower house at Pembury, and the income of £2,000, and the freedom to leave me at any hour of any day for the rest of your life. That nothing in the new settlement is to require the production of an heir, that I shall be your husband, Marisol, on whatever terms you will permit, and on no others. I went to the stables because I could not bear to remain in the breakfast room while I was still the kind of man who would hold you to the contract, and I needed an hour to become a different one. I have not been touched in 11 years, and I don't know how to do this, and I keep walking out of rooms instead of speaking, and I am asking you to forgive me, and I am asking you to stay, and I don't have the right to ask either, but I am asking, Marisol, please." He was not looking at her. He was looking at the floor. She crossed the morning room. She took his face in both her hands, the way he had taken hers in the library of his dead brother, and she lifted it until he was obliged to meet her own. "Vaughn," she said, "look at me when you ask." He looked at her. "Stay," he said. "Please." "Yes," she said. "Yes?" "Yes, Vaughn. Yes, I shall stay. Not because of the contract, not because of your mother, not because of your sisters, or my sisters, or any of the small, trapped reasons that have been arranged about us. I shall stay because I have begun to know you, and the knowing is the only thing in my life that has ever felt like a choice." He lowered his head against her shoulder, and the Duke of Witherholm, who had not been touched in 11 years, who had buried 2 brothers, and a father, and 1 fiancé, and 100 small, unspoken things, stood in the morning room of his London house, with his face hidden in the place where his future wife's neck met her shoulder, and he wept without sound. And Marisol Vance held him, and the snow fell on, and the day, against every expectation, began. The scandal came anyway. Cassivine, on the road to Dover, posted the letter from a coaching inn in Rochester out of pure malice, and 3 London papers carried some version of it within the week. The terms were not known, but the existence of a contract was alleged, and a Miss Vance of Holmcross was named, and the Duke of Witherholm was said to have purchased his bride for the production of an heir. The drawing rooms of Mayfair did what they had always done. Voices dropped when she entered. Old women wrote to her uncle to express their regret that the Vance girl had been so unfortunately disposed of. She was, by then, already married. The wedding had been held at Witherholm House, by special license, in the small chapel on the ground floor, with the Dowager Aurelia in a wheeled chair and a green cashmere shawl across her knees, and the Dowager had wept, and the Duke had not. He had stood very straight and very still throughout the ceremony, and when the moment had come for him to take Marisol's hand, he had taken it with both of his, and he had held it to his mouth for one long, quiet second before he had spoken his vows. Her sisters had come. Pernilla had cried through the entire ceremony in a frock the Duke had ordered for her from a Bond Street modiste, and Linnea, freshly tended by a London physician, had not coughed once. The Duke had set up a separate apartment for them on the second floor of Witherholm House, and when she had asked him, the night before the wedding, why he had taken the trouble, he had said that the contract he had torn up had been the worst document he had ever written, and he had wished to pay back every clause of it before the sun set. There were 3 other dukes in England who would not receive the new Duchess of Witherholm in their houses for the first 6 months of the marriage. Marisol was informed of this by a footman who blushed when he delivered the news, and she had thanked him and asked him to bring up another cup of chocolate, and not mentioned it again. Vaughan mentioned it. He stood beside her at the first of the great public balls of the season, 6 weeks after the wedding, and he kept her hand on his arm for the entire evening, and he danced with her 4 times, which was twice more than was decent. When a certain marchioness affected not to see her at the supper table, the Duke raised his glass deliberately across the room and said, in a voice that traveled, "To my wife, who is the bravest creature in this room, and who has done me the honor of accepting me on terms I did not deserve to ask." And the Marchioness was obliged to drink, and within 3 months, the receiving rooms of Mayfair had quietly forgotten that they had ever required forgetting anything. Aurelia did not die that year. She did not die the year after either. She had decided, in the 3rd month of Marisol's marriage, that the only sensible place for her to die was the house in which she had been a bride, and they had both gone to Pembury with a great quantity of luggage and 1 small spaniel the Dowager had recently and inexplicably acquired, and the Dowager had lived there for 2 further years before she had, very quietly, on a Sunday morning in May, while holding Marisol's hand, gone to sleep. She was buried beside her sons. The Duke had wept at the graveside, against Marisol's shoulder, and she had held him, and he had not apologized for it afterward. And that, she thought, more than any other single thing, had been the moment in which she had understood what their marriage had become. 2 years after that. Briarmoor Hall in October, the great trees along the South Drive turning, the rooks calling from the rookery beyond the orchard. Marisol stood in the long gallery on the 1st floor, with one hand on the small of her back, and she watched Vaughan coming up the staircase toward her. He was carrying their daughter. Her name was Aurelia, after his mother, and she was 16 months old, and she had her mother's dark hair and her father's gray eyes, and she was at present asleep against his shoulder, with her small fist closed upon the lapel of his coat. The Duke was speaking to her in the low, murmuring, particular voice that he used for no one else in the world, and Marisol smiled, because she had not, when she had signed the contract in the study at Briarmoor that long ago afternoon, imagined any of it. There was no son. There was not, at present, even the promise of one. The contract that had once required an heir had been burnt, on the day of the wedding, in the grate of the Duke's study, the 2 of them watching it together, and there hadn't been, since that morning, a single word between them about heirs, or sons, or who, in the absence of one, would inherit Briarmoor Hall. Vaughan had said, on the morning the contract burned, that he did not care. He had said it to her, and he had said it to his solicitor, and he had said it, finally, to the daughter, who had been born on a wet February morning, with both hands cradling the back of her tiny head as though she had been the answer to a question he had been afraid to ask aloud. Marisol watched him reach the top of the stairs. He did not hand her the child. He came to her side, and he leaned down, and he kissed the top of Marisol's head, and he stood there for a moment with their daughter asleep against one shoulder, and his other hand resting on the curve of his wife's belly, where the second child, who would, as it would happen, be a son, was very quietly making its existence known. "You have been standing too long," he said. "I know. Sit. In a moment. Marisol. Vaughn." He smiled. It was no longer the almost smile she had first seen in the study at Briarmore. It was a smile that reached his eyes, and would, she thought, reach his eyes for the remainder of his natural life. "Do you remember," he said, "what I said to you on the morning Cassavane left England?" "I remember." I said, "Please." "You did." It was the first true word I had spoken in 11 years. "I know." He kissed her again, on the temple this time, and they stood together at the top of the staircase in the long October light, 3 of them, soon to be 4, and beyond the window, the rooks were calling, and the great trees were turning, and the contract that had once said one thing was burnt to nothing in a study downstairs, and the truth of their lives, she thought, was a small and quiet thing, and they had been very fortunate to find it. If you have stayed with Marisol and Vaughn until the very end of their story, thank you. Their beginning was a contract, written in cold ink upon a desk between 2 people who did not yet know one another. It was not love. It was arithmetic, but sometimes, very rarely, the arithmetic of 2 lonely lives leans a little closer to itself across a desk and asks a question it had not meant to ask, and the answer changes everything. He bought her, he thought, to bear his heir. She came, she thought, to save her sisters. By dawn, he was begging her to stay, and she stayed, not because of the contract, but because she had begun to know him, and the knowing was the only thing in her life that had ever felt like a choice. If you have not yet subscribed, do so now and ring the bell, because there are more stories waiting. More cold dukes who learn to speak softly. More clever women who will not be sold. Thank you for being here. You are the reason these stories are written,